Bite into a stacked sandwich made with Hero Bread, and the only thing you'll think is delicious. You won't think it has up to 19 grams protein, 11 to 32 grams of fiber, or just 0 to 5 grams net carbs. But it does. Hero Bread. No compromises, just loaves, buns, tortillas, bagels, and noodles packed with flavor. Right now, get 10% off at hero.co with code IHEART. That's HERO.co, code IHEART. All figures per serving of Hero Bread. See nutrition facts on hero.co.
You know what quality feels like. You can see it in the way a fabric moves, recognize it in a flawless fit, and appreciate it in the details that make our styles unique. It's the standard Coldwater Creek has honored for over 40 years, derived from a rich Mountain West heritage, and designed for today in styles that are distinctively Coldwater Creek. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop new arrivals and save 15% on purchases $75 or more with code IHEART.
It's the 26th of June, 2024. Winter in the Barrington country, northwest of Gloucester, where the paddocks run up into bush that has not been burnt through in 50 years. It's late afternoon and the light is leaving the valley. Kathy and her husband Peter are out on a side-by-side, a Polaris, struggling across ground that Kathy knows well. They're looking for a man that Kathy has every reason in the world not to look for. But he is, at this moment, a man who is in desperate need of help. And they've been out for about half an hour when she sees it. Down near the creek. A quad bike sitting on its own in a clearing. Her initial assumption is that it's broken down, that it'll be sitting beside it, waiting, and she can put him on the back of the Polaris, and that'll be the end of it. Home in time for dinner and all that. But he's not there. She hops off the Polaris and goes to examine the quad bike properly. It's upright, sitting on a slight angle, maybe 30 degrees, on decent enough ground. The tyres are bald, no tread left on them at all, and she spent enough time on farms to be able to read exactly what's happened here. He's come down the track, trying to push through the gully, but found no grip in the mud. So he tries instead to get up the far side, but couldn't, and rolled back down. He turned around and tried yet the other way. Still no joy. But the quad bike is not in the creek. It's not bogged, not really. Nothing about the ground it's sitting on is holding it there. Kathy's words are that you could quite easily have gotten back onto that bike and driven it away. And so she continues her examination. If it's not the ground underneath the four-wheeler that presents a problem, it must be the vehicle itself. The key had stopped working on that quad some time back, so you start it the same way you'd start a mower, by hauling on a cord. Kathy tries. Nothing. Peter jumps off the Polaris and gives it a crack, but neither of them can pull it over. Whether Garry could have is something this case has never settled. Tina, Garry's new wife, will tell you that he pull-started that bike every single time and that it was simply how the thing ran. Garry was wiry but strong, and he could make it start. So, one of two things have happened in this clearing. Either the quad bike would not start for him either on this occasion, and he was on foot, whether he liked it or not. Or it would have started, and he left it anyway. Neither of those scenarios provides comfort or answers. 265 acres, the last of the light going, and a house about 15 minutes walk away, where a woman and a 3-year-old girl are waiting for Garry to come home. But that quad bike is the last confirmed trace of Garry Conwell. I'm your storyteller, Mark. Welcome back to Struth. And before we continue any further with today's episode, I want to tell you where this one came from. A few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be sent an advance copy of a book called Lost. It's the new offering from author Nicole Morris, who you might know from her previous books, Vanished and Missing, both of which were bestsellers covering missing persons cases here in Australia. And aside from being a tremendous author, Nicole has a unique insight into all of these cases that she covers in her books through her role as the director of the Australian Missing Persons Register. Today's episode covers one of the 14 cases of missing persons in her new book, Lost, which you'll find on bookshelves on the 28th of July. I'll link to it in the show notes, and that is a link you most definitely want to click. And so this is the case that I chose to cover from Lost. The inexplicable disappearance of Garry Conwell from his own property. I call this episode Up the Back. Garry Conwell was 71. He'd been at Rookhurst about 15 years at the time of this story, running cattle on a few hundred acres that ran up into bush that nobody could make their way through. In 2015, tragedy struck. Garry was carting water when his truck rolled. Nobody is certain whether the stroke came before the roll or after it. He was airlifted to John Hunter Hospital in Newcastle, and the reason he survived is Kathy, his partner of 6 years, who was living on the property at the time. Physically, Garry bounced back. He regained his strength and he never retired. But there was a permanent injury from oxygen loss, and this is the fact our entire case today potentially turns on. His brother Frank put it simply. Garry had no memory, couldn't remember a bloody thing. The impact that this was having was on clear display just the day before he disappeared, when Garry walked into the Gloucester post office and simply stood there in a daze, until the bloke behind the counter said, "Garry, you're in the post office, mate. What do you need?" To which Garry replied, "Well, I suppose I better get the mail." It's important to note, though, that one of his two sons, Mike, does not accept the word dementia, and he says so, flatly. He was told his father had it, but he never saw it. What he saw instead was a 71-year-old man who occasionally lost a name for a second or two, the ordinary type of malaise that comes with ageing. The other thing that we need to address early and honestly is Garry's checkered history with Kathy, the same woman from the opener that was desperately trying to find him in the fading daylight the day he went missing. Sometime after his accident in 2015, she and Garry separated, and it was, by all accounts, ugly. There were courts and police involved. Both of them had firearms confiscated during the period, and Kathy claimed that there were death threats made against her, that she was told she would not be alive to collect money that Garry had owed her. Even after the separation, she didn't go far, though. She moved along the same road to another property, where she still lives with her new husband, Peter. But despite the acrimonious nature of their split, she still supported Garry from afar, in important ways. She knew that Garry was out on that farm alone and that he wasn't taking his medication, and so Kathy arranged for a carer to come and help him. The woman the company sent was a lady named Tina. Her first day reads kinda like a scene from Farmer Wants a Wife. Tina came up the road in a little Mazda and got herself bogged in the bottom paddock, and the bloke that was out rounding up cattle helped to get her out. At the time, of course, neither had any idea who the other was, and once they'd figured it out, Garry was pretty adamant that he didn't want or need any help. But Tina won him over, and by the time she left on that very first day, Garry had decided that he didn't think it was so bad if Tina hung around for a bit. One thing led to another, and even though there was an age gap of more than 20 years between them, when Garry was 68, the pair had a daughter. And the one thing that every person in this story agrees on was that he was completely besotted with that little girl. Things had settled too between Kathy and Garry. They'd both moved on. But there were other things happening on that road that weren't as amicable. Before I go on, a few things I need to clear up, because the man in this next part is still alive. Nicole doesn't name him in her book, and neither will I. The fact of the matter is that he's never been charged with any of it, and he is not, to the best of our knowledge, a suspect in Garry's disappearance. But I am going to tell you about these incidents because it's important that you understand what life on that road was at the time that Garry went missing. The other thing I need to give you a heads up about is that I'm about to cover the death of 2 animals. So if you want to skip ahead a couple of minutes, please do so. The incidents centred around the death of 2 dogs. The first belonged to a neighbour, and it had been getting in amongst Garry's cattle. This was way back when Garry was with Kathy, and she was present when it all came to a head. She says the dog attacked the stock, that it chased one of her own wethers down into the gully, and that she was in that gully trying to save the beast when Garry shot it. The second dog came years later, and this time it was Tina who was present. Their daughter was about 9 months old at the time, and both Tina and the little girl were out in the yard when 3 dogs came up to the gate, barking, angry. Garry was over the fence at the time running a chainsaw and couldn't hear a thing. And so Tina threw a rock at Garry to make him look up and shouted one word at him: "Dogs." He hurried Tina and the baby back inside, and he fetched a gun. Her account is careful on this point. He did not mean to hit the dogs, and he claimed that he didn't even know at the time who the dogs belonged to. He meant to fire near them and simply move them on. But one of the dogs was hit, and it died. Police inevitably came that night and took a full report, because of the detail that joins the 2 stories together. The dog that Garry shot that day belonged to the same man who owned the first one. Tina goes on to tell us that this is one of 2 reports that Gloucester Police hold of major incidents between Garry and that neighbour. The other one started with a truck driver bogged in the bottom paddock in roughly the same spot Tina had buried her Mazda. The driver had Garry's address on his docket. He had every reason to be there, a simple misunderstanding. And Garry heard the commotion and took the quad down to help the truck driver get himself unbogged. But the next thing Tina knew, Garry was back at the house, telling her to ring the police straight away. The neighbour had come onto the property while Garry was helping the driver, and in Garry's words, he was in his face and he wouldn't leave. And there was a fight down there, a physical altercation. The important piece of information that came from the police about this incident wasn't from Garry or Tina or the neighbour. It was from the one person involved with nothing at stake. The truck driver told police the same thing that Tina did. The other man had picked a fight, not Garry, and there was no reason for him to have been on the property at all. In addition, we have Kathy, a woman who has less reason than anybody to stick up for Garry. But she does back Garry's version of events when it comes to the incidents that she was there for. She also warns against focusing on any one individual when we're trying to identify pre-existing ill will along the road. There was a lot of animosity on the road, she says. Garry had made some bad mistakes with his neighbours, he'd caused his fair share of problems. And so that, dear listeners, is the backdrop for what happens next. A man who has lost a good part of his memory, who has made very real enemies on his own road, but also a man whose life has changed for the better as a result of becoming a father again later in life. 3 competing factors that might well turn into clues and to help us determine what really happened to Garry Conwell. And this brings us to Wednesday, the 26th of June 2024. Garry woke up grumpy. The family had come back from their other property at Bundook the night before, and Garry had gone to bed without dinner, something he wasn't particularly keen on. And then, according to Tina, he did something that he'd never done before. Normally, their daughter started her day eating a banana while sitting in front of the TV, watching the cartoons, while Tina started her day making Garry his morning cup of coffee. But on that morning, Garry insisted his daughter sit at the table and eat her breakfast with him. He said to Tina that he wanted to spend time with his daughter. And that is exactly what they did. They sat there at that dining room table for a good hour, the two of them, talking, laughing, mucking around. And Tina reflects that it was definitely different, and that she is still baffled by his behaviour that morning. After breakfast, Garry started on about his cattle. Nobody had laid eyes on the stock at Rookhurst for a couple of days because, as I mentioned, they'd been away at the other property in Bundook, and Garry wanted to go and check on them. Tina tried to convince him not to worry, the cows were fine, but he was persistent, asking her time and time again. She finally relented and told him to go and sort it out. And it was around 11 o'clock when he left the house. He wasn't dressed for it though, because in his mind at that time he wasn't going far. Garry was wearing a navy, fleecy dressing gown, possibly a pair of jocks, and possibly a blue singlet, although Tina can't be sure on either of those accounts. And he was also wearing a pair of worn brown leather work boots. On his way out of the house, he put his head around the corner of the playroom. "I'm up the back," he said to Tina, just in case. It was a common thing for him to say as he left the house. Nothing about the first few hours was particularly alarming. Garry had no sense of time. He never had. 2 or 3 hours away was ordinary. He'd spot something that needed fixing, and he'd see to it, just like farmers do, there and then. Or sometimes he'd just get caught up pulling out tobacco bush. He'd wander in completely oblivious hours later to ask whether it was lunchtime. And so Tina waited. At first she thought he must have forgotten that they were due to head back to the other property at Bundook to finish off some work from the day before. But by the time 4 o'clock rolled around, a sense of unease in Tina had festered for long enough. 5 hours out there in his dressing gown. Something began to feel really off. She put her daughter in the car and drove slowly up the road, checking up the neighbours' driveways one by one. And she went home again and called Kathy. Of everyone Tina could have called, she rang the woman Garry had allegedly threatened to kill. But there were 2 good reasons for that decision. Other than Garry, Kathy knew that property better than anyone. And also, Kathy was the only person Tina really knew on the road at all. And so Kathy answered the call from a now panicked Tina. She was screaming down the phone that Garry had gone to look at the cattle hours ago and that she couldn't find him. And this is how Kathy and Peter came to be out on the Polaris in the last of the light, and how they came to find the quad bike by the creek. Not bogged, but not starting either. Kathy called the police, and she gave them a summary that defined everything about the search. A man in his 70s, an existing head injury, lost on his very own 265 acres.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
The response was fast and it was enormous. By 7 o'clock that evening, they had Pol Air overhead, police rescue on the ground, and SES volunteers already searching the scrub. Kathy and Peter searched with torches until 8 p.m. It was very dark that evening, very cold. And in one of the stranger decisions made on that first night, police decided that Tina shouldn't stay in her own house. They didn't ask, Kathy said. They decided. And so the missing man's partner and her daughter spent that night under the roof of the missing man's ex-partner. Kathy woke at 5:30 in the morning because she felt someone watching her. It was Tina, standing at the foot of the bed, tears in her eyes, staring at her. "We need to get back out there and look," she said. In fact, she demanded. And over the following days, it became the largest search the region had ever seen. The Westpac Rescue Helicopter, even more SES, the VRA, the Rural Fire Service, a dog squad from Newcastle, drones in the air, sonar in the water, whippersnippers cutting back scrub so people could physically get through it. Kathy watched pilots working the hillside with heat sensors, flying low, threading between trees by what she describes as millimetres. Surely all of this effort would be more than enough to find a bloke who had gone to check on cattle on his own property in his bloody dressing gown. Surely. But it wasn't until the second day that they found the only two things anyone would ever find of Garry. A search dog located human faeces, which was thought to have been Garry's. And some distance further down the hill, the cord from Garry's dressing gown. That is the entire physical record of what happened to Garry Conwell after 11 o'clock that morning. It's also important to note that both of those items were found uphill from the quad bike. And we're not talking about a gentle stroll on an open sheep paddock here either. The country between the bike and the cord was absolutely chockers with lantana. If you've not had the pleasure of dealing with lantana, this is not scrub you push through. It's a dense, woody thicket that tears cloth and opens skin, and on that hillside it had been building thicker, stronger for 50 years. Put plainly, this is not the way you walk by choice. You would have to have an extraordinary reason to do so. Searchers, including Kathy and Peter, were asked to go up where the faeces had been found, and they simply couldn't do it. 5 of them put on jackets, helmets, visors, and still they struggled. And when they got in there, Kathy saw the thing that has bothered her ever since. The lantana was completely intact. Nothing was broken. No stems snapped. No channel had been pushed through. No path had been made. You can't move through lantana without leaving a wound in it, especially if you're a 70-year-old man in a dressing gown. Her fire captain turned to her in the middle of that thicket and said a sentence that this entire case might just rest on. It's impossible that Garry could have done this. The search also included a check of an old gold mine on the property. It was sealed. And there were other shafts further up the hill. They were sealed too. The SES sent specially trained people in to be certain, and they found nothing to suggest that that's where Garry had ended up. And so at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of July, 6 days after Garry walked out of his kitchen, the search was suspended. And this leaves us with 3 main possibilities. And plenty of people have argued against all of them. The first is that he took his own life. Garry's adult son, Mike, calls this highly doubtful. Possible, he says, but his father would have taken a firearm to perform the task. And each of the property's 7 guns were all accounted for. Mike's brother, Garry's other son Scott, goes even further. Garry would not have walked uphill to do this. The sons walked those hills themselves repeatedly, younger and considerably fitter than their old man. They found no sign anyone had been up there where the cord had been found. Garry's brother Frank too dismisses this in a sentence. He would never have left voluntarily because he loved that little girl. Tina also mentions a potential clue that we haven't yet covered, and that's the farm's Toyota Land Cruiser, which was found parked behind the shed with the driver's door open and keys in the ignition. Garry would have never left that ute standing open with the keys in it, Tina says, because he did not want rats getting into the cab. And so here's what she thinks might have happened. At some point during the day, Garry came back down off the hill. Not all the way to the house, because he had no reason to, just as far as the shed, where the Land Cruiser was parked. And he opened it up, and he went to start it, because to Tina's mind, the ute was the one vehicle on the farm with enough power to get back up those hills and drag the quad out. But it wouldn't go. The battery was flat, a fact that was confirmed by Garry's 2 sons the following day when they tried to start the Land Cruiser. So where Garry went after that, Tina's not sure. She just knows that he never came into the house. She believes that the walk back down the hill is the thing that rules out suicide. Not because of anything it says about how Garry was feeling, but purely because of what he was doing. A man who comes back down for a ute is in the middle of an errand. A dull, practical, forward-looking errand. He is focused on dragging his quad bike out of a gully so that he can get on with his day. You don't salvage a machine you have no intention of ever using again. And the errand only makes sense if he expected to still be there tomorrow. The second theory is that he got lost, and the country, his own country, took him. This is what his neighbour, Danny Anderson, believes. Important to add here that Danny is not the person on the road that we've already referenced. This is a different neighbour, and he recalls a recent event to support his stance. 2 weeks before the disappearance, Danny turned up at the property and Garry simply did not recognise him. He thought he was a delivery driver, and for Danny this was all the evidence that he needed to think that Garry's mental state was deteriorating. Danny thinks that Garry simply wandered off, got lost, and the elements got the better of him. He raises the possibility of the mine shafts and mentions how dense the bush is in places. He also shares the sad fact that he's barely been back to his own property since. It's just too eerie being out there now, he says. Garry's son Mike, however, can't accept this theory either. You would have to work really hard not to find the house or the road, he says, even in a fugue state, even dementia-ridden. 10 minutes walk in either direction and you hit one or the other. And again, you would not walk uphill into that impenetrable lantana if you were simply disoriented. And this leaves us with a third theory, that someone else was involved. And Tina raises one possible suggestion here. She doesn't suggest that anything was planned. What she says is that if Garry went looking for water, in whatever state that he was in, that water is downhill from the quad bike and it sits on one of their boundaries. A confused man could very easily end up somewhere he was not supposed to be. And somebody, she said, might have been waiting down there with a weapon. Just to reiterate, Tina doesn't name a person here. There's no name in Nicole's book, and there's nothing in the public domain establishing that a crime was committed at all. But if not the unnamed man, then who? Kathy says that she lost count of how many times that her and Peter were questioned. And she's clear-eyed about why. Police knew the history. By their reckoning, she had motive. But let's have a quick look at what Kathy and Peter did do that day. Tina rang them in a panic, and they went to help. They found the quad bike, which remains the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. They made the emergency call. They searched that night with torches and came back day after day. They crawled through Lantana until their legs bled. And they took Tina and her 3-year-old daughter into their house on a night when Tina had nowhere else to go. This all seems rather unlikely for a couple of people who have just committed a murder. One officer up at the search said it straight to Kathy's face. "What are you doing here? You know he wanted to kill you. You had restraining orders against him. Why do you care?" The answer she provided, I think, says a lot about Kathy. She replied to the officer, "He's a 71-year-old man with a head injury, lost in the bush." She never thought about it beyond that. He was a person who was lost and needed help, and that's exactly what she did. In addition to this, it's important to know that Kathy and Peter handed over security footage from their own property voluntarily, and that showed them on their property throughout the day in question. Nobody from New South Wales Police has spoken to them since. Not to charge them, not to clear them. Kathy has spent over a year believing she might be arrested at any time for Garry Conwell's disappearance. And it's important to know how that anxiety was lifted. It wasn't with a phone call from a detective. It ended when Nicole Morris, writing this book, was able to tell Kathy what police had repeatedly told Gary's sons, that the disappearance was not being treated as suspicious, and that she was not a suspect. But I think we'll give the last word in today's story to Tina. Police have told her more than once that the medical experts on site advised them that a disoriented man couldn't get far. Her answer to that statement, I think, is the question that this whole episode has been working towards. She simply replied, "Then I don't understand why you have not found him." Because Garry, she says, would have walked and walked until he found a way out. He would not have sat down and given up. That was not who this bloke was. You can't fall off the face of the earth, she says. And that is the contradiction that this case sits on. According to the medical experts, he can't have gone far. And yet, on his own property, he can't be found. Garry Conwell went missing on the 26th of June 2024 from his property on Craven Creek Road, Rookhurst, about 20 kilometres northwest of Gloucester in New South Wales. He was 71 years old at the time, around 180 centimetres tall, of medium build, with greying hair. He was last seen riding a quad bike, which was later found on the property. He was wearing a navy blue fleecy dressing gown, possibly underpants, possibly a blue singlet, and a pair of brown leather work boots. If you know anything at all about the disappearance of Garry Conwell, please contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000. And if you've enjoyed this story, Nicole's amazing book is out on the 28th of July, and Garry's chapter is just one of many. What makes her writing so amazing isn't just her ability as an author, but it is in the very real connection that she shares with these families. I could not recommend it highly enough. Again, I'll put some links in the show notes, and I'd encourage you to pick yourself up a copy. And that's it for me this week on Struth. A special episode today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you followed the show, subscribed, whatever it is on your podcasting platform. Give us a rating. All that sort of stuff makes a huge difference to an independent podcast. And if you can't get enough Struth, just remember we do have Struth Premium episodes available on both Patreon and through Apple subscription. There's 20 episodes available there now, so plenty for you to listen to. Until next week, that's it from me. Hooroo.
Skincare means Sephora. Makeup, same. They've got the products, expertise, and the brands that fit your lifestyle. But when I talk about hair care, do you make the same connection? Well, you should. Sephora is just as trusted for hair, whether you're looking to repair, strengthen, hydrate, or add shine. You'll find brands like Kerastase, K18, and Gisou. Plus, the guidance to help you choose what's right for your hair. And with free shipping and same-day delivery, great hair care is easier than ever. Shop hair at Sephora today.
We learned how to love dogs from the dogs that loved us and waited for us to get home from school. They were the dogs that raised us. We returned the love with Pedigree dog food. It was good then, and it's better now. Every bowl has 100% complete nutrition supporting 6 health essentials. And now it includes Vitamin Good Bites, a nutrient boost your dog will love. Pedigree. Good then, better now.
M&M's popped caramel do sound different. Oh no, people are going to be obsessed.
What do you mean?
People hate the sound of chewing. Maybe they won't like the crunch.
Maybe we're saved.
Wait a minute. Yellow!
Huh?
Have you been eating them this whole time?
So tasty.
Hands off us.
M&M's popped caramel. It's more fun together.
This is Tony Ayo from The Real Report with Tony Ayo and Uncle Murder. You ever notice how everything keeps going up? Rent, streaming, even extra salsa at your favorite burrito spot? But with Boost Mobile, you don't have to play the will this go up soon game. Boost Mobile offers an unlimited talk, text, and data plan at a price that'll never go up. It's the same price you'll pay for life. Switch now for unlimited wireless at a price that'll never go up, only at Boost Mobile. After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.